5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, and welcome to the First Universalist Church of Yarmouth. Wow, that was gathering music. My name is Sarah Whitty. I'm a member of the board, which keeps us connected to our mission, and also on Congregation Connections, which keeps us connected to each other. I'm so happy to be greeting you again this morning, alive and well from my home. I hope you are well too. I can feel we are together in spirit this morning, though, and that feels really good. At First Universalist, our mission is to explore our faith, embrace this community, and to engage the world as spiritual seekers. May we take those words to heart. Before our service begins this morning, I have the following announcements. Number one, all are welcome to join us for fellowship in Zoom this morning following our worship service. The link for that meeting is in your email this morning. During this time, we catch up with one another and reflect on the thoughts and questions that arose for us during today's worship service. Number two, to keep us connected and as a way to see each other's faces, dear faces, we're going to be putting up a collage of photos from our community to play during our Sunday services. If you have a photo you'd like to include, great. Please send your pictures to Gwen by Sunday, January 24th. Okay, number three, have you heard about the proposed 8th principle? It will call UUs to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Across the country, UUs are considering adding this to our 7 principles. And in fact, the UUA is planning to vote on it at the General Assembly in 2022. First Universalist's Anti-Racism Working Group has been doing cottage meetings via Zoom this month to discuss the 8th principle, to discuss endorsing the spirit of the 8th principle. We're hoping that through small group discussions, we can be ready to do this at our mid-year meeting on Sunday, January 31st, right after worship. And you can read the exact text of that proposal on the First Universalist website. So the response to these meetings has been strong and positive, and they're all filled up. Reverend Hillary and members of the Anti-Racism Working Group are available, though, for conversations, and we would be happy to send you everything that was shared at the cottage meetings. So please be in touch if you'd like that. And as you can imagine, this is only the beginning for us. We are anti-racists in training with much explore, embrace, engage on the road up ahead. For now, let's all take a deep breath. Let's settle into this different but still sacred time and space we create together each week. And Reverend Hillary will lead us into our worship.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Sarah, and for all that good information. And good morning, my friends. How are you? It's good to be with you. My name is Reverend Hillary Collins-Gilpatrick. I'm the minister of First Universalist Church in Yarmouth, Maine, and it is with great and unabashed joy that I say, whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, whatever you've done, you are welcome here. We're so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we offer you a service of readings and reflections, music and quiet in honor of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who, were he still alive, would have turned 92 years old on Friday. Tomorrow, we celebrate our national holiday in honor of King's memory and spirit, a powerful liftoff point for yet another eventful and important week ahead. And my friends, this morning, I invite you to let down your guard. Make space in your worried, tired minds. Open up your fretful hearts and just let this service wash over you. Let this morning be a breath of fresh new air, a sip of invigorating water, and a moment to just pause from the paranoid news cycles, pause from the uncertainties, pause from the impatience, the anger, the desperate hope, and let the words of one of our national prophets for liberation just sink in. Let Martin Luther King's words sink in this morning and bring you back to this present moment, the most important moment that never lacks possibilities, never lacks opportunities to learn new things, and continues to provide ways to shift our thinking and use our actions to benefit all. Today during our service, Sam Chandler, our music director, will reflect on the music of the civil rights era. Gwen and I will offer a time for all ages where we try to understand the big words of anti-racist activism. And Andrew Tonks and I will highlight two of MLK's celebrated works, his letter from a Birmingham jail and his I've Seen the Mountaintop sermon. Though we'll be quoting from these works throughout the service, I encourage you to seek them out in their entirety, as not only are these words invigorating, they're relevant to the current state of affairs in our country, cannot be overstated. Our opening words this morning are an ode to Martin Luther King Jr. by Gwendolyn Brooks, a prophet deserving of great celebration and reflection in her own right. Brooks won the Pulitzer for her poetry in 1950, the first African-American to ever do so, and was also the first African-American woman inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Letters. The poem we read by her today is entitled Martin Luther King Jr. A man went forth with gifts. He was a prose poem. He was a tragic grace. He was a warm music. He tried to heal the vivid volcanoes. His ashes are reading the world. His dream still wishes to anoint the barricades of faith and of control. His word still burns the center of the sun, above the thousands and the 100,000s. The word was justice. It was spoken. So it shall be spoken. So it shall be done. Friends, our worship has begun. I'm so glad we are alive and together on this bright new day. As I light the symbol of our faith, a light of courage, steadfastness, and love, won't you join me in saying aloud our chalice lighting blessing? We light our chalice in peace and friendship. Our opening hymn is number 151, I Wish I Knew How It Feels to Be Free. And Sam will offer a few words about this hymn before he plays. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, so this is a great song. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I've been at this church now for 3 or 4 years. I sort of came in halfway through a year, so 3 or 4 years. And I have never felt comfortable singing the lyrics of this song. I find they're too personal and specific to the experience of Black people in the civil rights movement. but I've played the music a number of times. I just kind of want to dive into my process for picking music, my imperfect and hopefully still growing process. So a song like this, playing the music, my thought is you can enjoy the feeling and the emotion of it without having to hear those specific words coming from a white person's mouth. Some of those words that I think are awfully specific that I'll be singing today for the first time are things like, I wish I could break all these chains binding me. And while a lot of the words in the song can be taken and observed metaphorically, and you can draw a personal experience for them, even if you maybe aren't from a group of people with a history of being enslaved in our country, I don't think that's the right course of action. I think our job here as white people and observers, for those of us who are who don't have that direct connected history, it's really important for a song like this to think about that purpose and the goal of Billy Taylor and why he wrote these words in the civil rights movement. This is a gospel tune. It's not even specifically religious. It's specifically about the civil rights movement and the desire to want to feel free. So, with a lot of the music I choose, I do sort of step into boundaries that maybe are outside of my lived and personal experience. And I do think that there is a cultural exchange in music that is important and healthy. But there's always a hesitance with a song like this for performing it. So I just want you to be aware that that's my feeling on this. I will never feel entirely comfortable singing this, but here I am singing it for you. Please, please, please think about the context of the song, when it was written as music specifically for the civil rights era. So here's number 151, I Wish I Knew How. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all these chains binding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole wide world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. Remove all the bars that still keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun how it feels to be free.
Hey, everyone. My name is Reverend Hillary. I'm the minister of our beloved church.
And I'm Gwen. I work at the church with kids, youth, and grown-ups.
And today we're going to talk about big words and big ideas.
Not words that are long or hard to say, but words that are big because they are important and full of meaning.
Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday was Friday and who we honor tomorrow, loved big words. He knew how much power words can have.
And he used his words and his actions to try to change the world and inspired a lot of people to do the same.
Yes, he did, including someone named Ibram Kendi, who wrote this book called Anti-Racist Baby. And this is a book that also has some really big words.
All right. So Anti-Racist Baby starts with, anti-racist baby is bred, not born. Anti-racist baby is raised to make society transform.
Whoa, big words in there for sure. And then next, he writes that babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Whoa, these are such big words. And there are 9 steps to make equity a reality.
Equity, that's one of those big words, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think equity means?
Well, equity sounds a lot like equality.
Yeah, it does, but it's not the same. It's not exactly the same.
Right, you're right, Gwen. Equality means that everyone gets the same thing, which sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But equity means everyone gets what they need, which sounds a little better.
Okay, so equality, everyone gets the same. Equity, everyone gets what they need. So if I understand, okay, let's say you have 4 apples. Well, you have them. And if there's 2 of us, if we were practicing equality, I would get 2 apples and you would get 2 apples.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I could give you these 2 apples, Gwen, but I don't know how to do that over Zoom. Back to equity, though. If one of us had just eaten lunch and the other one was really hungry and hadn't eaten since yesterday, should we both still get 2 apples?
No, I think it would actually be more fair in that case if the person who was really hungry, so if you were really hungry, you would get 3 apples maybe, and I would get 1, or maybe you'd get all 4 apples and I wouldn't eat any because I just had lunch.
That makes a lot of sense. So Gwen, I still really want to give you at least 2 of my apples. So equity is aside. But yeah, you're exactly right. That's equity. Everyone gets what they need. If I hadn't had any apples today and Gwen had had apples and had more to give, she would give me some. Everyone gets what they need.
All right, let's keep reading.
Lost my page and looking for all those apples.
Yeah. All right. The first step in anti-racist baby is to open your eyes to all skin colors. I like the pictures because you can see all sorts of different skin colors in the pictures.
Yeah, the pictures are really great. This is a really great book for all ages, I think, not just anti-racist babies.
Yeah.
The second step is to use your words to talk about race. But wait, Gwen, is it rude to notice and talk about the color of people's skin or what race they are?
We shouldn't have to pretend everyone is the same. People come from all different cultures and people have different skin colors. The problem isn't noticing these things. The problem is that some people are treated differently because of how they look or where they're from.
Gwen, you're so smart.
Oh, thanks.
The third step is about, I'm focusing on so many big ideas in our conversation, Gwen. I keep losing track of what's on these pages, processing a lot of it.
Yeah.
So the third step to being an anti-racist baby is all about what you were just talking about. The book says that some people get more while others get less because policies don't always grant equal access.
These really are big words and big ideas in here. They really are. And the fourth step is this is my favorite page.
Yeah.
Even though all races are not all treated the same, we are all human, anti-racist baby can proclaim.
We are all human. That's not just one big word, but it's a big idea. Because we're all human, even if we have different skin colors, come from different places, or have different families, we still are all the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah. The fifth step is to celebrate all our differences. So I think that means we can celebrate the ways we're different and celebrate the ways we're the same.
Yeah. I love celebrating our differences. I think that is a wonderful, big idea. And it's just like the sixth step, which is that an anti-racist baby appreciates how groups speak, dance, and create as they choose. Anti-racist baby welcomes all groups voicing their unique views.
Wouldn't it be boring if we all spoke the same and danced the same and created the same? I'm really glad that we're all different and we can do those things differently.
Yeah.
The seventh step says, confess when being racist. And that's another one of those big ideas, huh?
Yeah, and that's kind of a big, hard idea. Confessing means telling, and racist means you're using your power with words or actions to hurt someone else because you believe that people who have a different skin color or different culture are not as good as you. In America, this means white people saying or doing things that hurt Black or brown people because their skin color isn't white.
Wow. So if I do something or someone else does something, you should tell other people in your life if you say or do something that is racist?
Yeah, it's hard to do, but it's important, Gwen, you know? If we talk about the ways the things that we think or believe or say or do are racist, if we acknowledge that, then we can work on changing these things about ourselves. The only way to end racism is if we all can see and understand when we're being racist. and then work not to be racist anymore, or to be anti-racist, which maybe we should have said at the beginning, means to be against racism.
And that's our 8th step, actually, is grow to be an anti-racist. So by following these steps we've just talked about, that's how you grow to be an anti-racist, or someone who is against racism.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem. We can do it. This is another picture that I really love, going, look at all these cool folks just hanging out on a couch together. This is the sort of thing I really miss doing these days. Someday soon. We end now with the 9th step, which is believe we shall overcome racism. And that's a word we throw around all the time, right? Believe. But it is a huge word. Yeah. What does it mean to believe something, Gwen?
I think to believe something, it means we find something to be true in both our hearts and our minds.
To believe something is to find something to be true in our hearts and our minds. Yeah, that's wise. My friends, let's just take a moment to let that sink into our hearts and minds. We shall overcome racism. We will end racism one day.
Yeah, one day people will all be treated fairly, equitably. That's that big word again, equity, equitably. Someday we will celebrate all the ways we're different and the ways we're the same.
Yeah, I can't wait until that day comes, Gwen. Can't wait. I'm glad we're in it together.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've offered folks enough big words for today. What do you think, Gwen?
I think so.
All right. Well, amen, everybody, and let it be so.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And it makes me say to myself, how do we get there? So I'm Andrew Tonks, and I'm proud to be on the anti-racism working group at our church. And my reflection is on a letter that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote while he was in jail in Birmingham on April 16th, 1963. Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail was an explanation of the need for and the use of nonviolent protest to end segregation. It was in response to white church leaders' opposition to such action. It's a long letter. As he says at the end, it would have been much shorter if I'd been writing from a comfortable desk. But what else can one do when he is alone in a narrow jail cell other than write long letters, think long thoughts, and pray long prayers? How comfortable are we? Dr. King was speaking as one Christian to other Christians. We may not share his religious beliefs or devotion to the Christian church, but I believe our UU principles are firmly in line with his moral exhortations in this letter. We don't talk about segregation now, but when we speak of systemic racism, we're talking about the same injustice Dr. King wrote about. Martin Luther King's letter was a call to nonviolent action to end segregation. The heart of segregation was the objectification of Black people as inferior, relegating persons to the status of things. This hasn't changed. Dr. King berates moderate whites for their complacency and complicity. They told him to wait. As he famously said in this letter, "For years now I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see, with one of our distinguished jurists, that justice too long delayed is justice denied." What are we waiting for? Martin Luther King's voice is a call to action. Today, we don't need to sit with Black people at Birmingham lunch counters. But what do we need to do? Ibram X. Kendi has told us that demonstrations have never changed anything. Policymakers need to see a compelling threat to their self-interest to change racist policies. As Martin Luther King said, privileged groups seldom give up their privilege voluntarily. Further, he said, nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. When asked, "Why now?" Martin Luther King responded, "The time is always ripe to do the right. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. Now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity." That was true in 1963 and is just as true now, 58 years later. So, what will we do?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Sam. My friends, I invite you to join me in a time of quiet right now. A time to offer yourself a prayer for someone else, or a prayer for our world, or just be here now in all the sensations that this moment offers. Please take a breath with me and enjoy this time of stillness. Amen. And let it be so.
Our half plate offering this week supports the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine, RJIM. RJIM promotes a cultural and systemic shift to how Mainers approach wrongdoing by advancing the use of restorative justice across the state. Its community-driven projects include the Youth Justice Program for young people at risk, and the Restorative Schools program, recognizing the fact that students learn how to be in community inside our schools. Currently, the Restorative Justice Institute is working with Yarmouth youth and residents, following up on a racist incident that occurred in our town last November. The work of Restorative Justice Institute of Maine forwards a movement that builds safer and more peaceful communities from which we all benefit. You are invited to make your offering using the donate button in the order of worship. By clicking this link, you will be taken to Give Butter, a virtual giving site that accepts a card, PayPal, or Venmo account. You may also give your offering by dropping a check in the mail or using your bank's free online pay feature. This morning's offering has now been requested and will be gratefully received. Thank you so much.
I offer a reading from the opening paragraphs of Martin Luther King Jr.'s final public speech, "I've been to the mountaintop." I'm not him, nor am I Black, so I read it with humble respect and in honor of Dr. King. King gave the sermon extemporaneously to an overflowing crowd gathered in a Masonic temple in Memphis, Tennessee, on April 3rd, 1968. The following evening, at 7:05 p.m., he would be pronounced dead from a gunshot wound. Reverend Dr. King begins his mountaintop sermon by imagining this scene. If I were standing at the beginning of time with a panoramic view of the whole human history up to now, and the Almighty said to me, "Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in?" I would take my mental flight to Egypt, cross the Red Sea, through the wilderness, on toward the promised land. And in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would move on to Greece and take my mind to Mount Olympus, and I would see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, and Euripides assembled around the Parthenon as they discussed the great and eternal issues of reality. But I wouldn't stop there. I would go on, even to the great heyday of the Roman Empire, and I would see developments through the various emperors and leaders. But I wouldn't stop there. I would go. I would even come up to the day of the Renaissance and get a quick picture of all that the Renaissance did for the cultural and aesthetic life of man. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even go by the day that the man for whom I'm named lived. And I would watch Martin Luther as he tacked his 95 Theses on the door of the Church of Wittenberg. But I wouldn't stop there. I would come on up even to 1863 and watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the early 30s and see a man grappling with the problems of bankruptcy of his nation and come with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. But I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. Now that's a strange statement to make, because the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is in the land. Confusion all around. That's a strange statement. But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And I see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way that man, in some strange way, are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up. And wherever they are assembled today, whether they are in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. And another reason that I'm happy to live in this period is that we've been forced to a point where we're going to have to grapple with the problems that men have been trying to grapple with through history, but the demand didn't force them to do it. Survival demands that we grapple with them. Men for years now have been talking about war and peace, but now no longer can they just talk about it. It is no longer a choice between violence and nonviolence in this world. It's nonviolence or non-existence. That is where we are today. In the human rights revolution, if something isn't done, and in a hurry, to bring the colored peoples of the world out of their long years of poverty, their long years of hurt and neglect. The whole world is doomed. Now, I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period to see what is unfolding.
Thanks, Andrew. It's written that when King arrived in Memphis on April 3rd, 1968, to deliver what would be known as his "I've Been to the Mountaintop" sermon, he was exhausted. He was being criticized by members of the Black Power movement for being too moderate. He was being condemned by moderates for being too radical. He was facing national scrutiny for his stance against the Vietnam War. And his latest cause, supporting striking sanitization workers in Memphis, a cause that served as the impetus for the Poor People's Campaign, was so powerful that days prior to his speech, he had to call off a march last minute in Memphis for fear that it would be violent. Alongside all of this, of course, was the constant barrage of death threats he received, years of strain on his marriage, and years of battling depression. And I can only imagine what other symptoms of chronic trauma. I am sure on that day, he was exhausted. King spoke in Memphis that evening on behalf of the sanitization workers of Memphis, on strike due to low wages, long hours, and working conditions so poor that multiple men had died on the job in recent months. These were the men on strike who wore the iconic "I Am a Man" placards upon their bodies as they marched through Memphis streets in 1968. Though King issued a rallying cry in support of these workers, he also called the angry and exhausted, overflowing crowd to unite. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness, he preached extemporaneously. A dangerous unselfishness. Now there's some big words for you. We've got to stay together and maintain unity, he explained. Whenever Pharaoh wanted to prolong the period of slavery in Egypt, he had a favorite formula. What was it? He kept the slaves fighting amongst themselves. But whenever the slaves got together, something happened, and Pharaoh could not hold the slaves in slavery. When the slaves get together, King concluded, that's the beginning of getting out of slavery. Now let us maintain unity. In the sermon, King called those gathered to boycott companies with poor working conditions. He listed these companies, explaining that collectively, if all Black people bonded together, their economic power would be greater than the economic power of all these companies put together. And in the midst of these boots on the ground calls to action over and over, MLK offered gratitude to God for being alive. And as you heard from the reading Andrew just shared, not just being alive in America in the second half of the 20th century. Let us rise up tonight with greater readiness, King proclaimed. Let us stand with a greater determination, and let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation, and I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you. My friends, I read a lot of Martin Luther King Jr. this week. And usually on MLK Sunday, I make a point to honor not only King, but many voices from the movement to which he belonged. I think it's misguided to look primarily to one voice in a movement, one civil rights prophet, one straight man's experience within a vast, complex, and ongoing movement for social and racial equality in America. And I feel the same about the anti-racist movement in which we find ourselves today. We must diversify the voices we turn to for guidance on the Black experience in America and what's needed to undo the bonds of racism in our country. Please, my friends, look to the writings of Black and brown men, of course, but also look to Black and brown women, trans folks, and queer folks for wisdom right now. This past week, though, I could just not stop. I could not stop reading Martin Luther King. And I encourage you to do the same. And yeah, might I suggest this book, The Radical King, a collection of MLK's writing and speeches edited by Cornel West. And hey, perhaps use your economic power and buy it from somewhere other than Amazon, which is not a company that provides safe or ethical working conditions. I'm sure there were many psychological reasons why I kept turning to MLK this week, probably something to do with going back to basics in these wild and unsteady times. But all I know is that reading King helped me center my anger and enabled me to tune in and really feel my grief and fear right now. His words reined in my rage and called me back to the power of his ethic of love. I've been to the mountaintop in particular sparked a great sense of urgency in me to stay the course these powerful days and keep using my voice, my money, my brain, and my heart to dismantle white supremacist culture within myself and within my beloved community. Friends, last week, I described to you the figure of the Bodhisattva. Do you remember? The warrior of compassion, who, yes, definitely practices dangerous unselfishness, and yet believes their work to be easy and pleasant, or at least tries. I shared this as an attempt to help you shift your narrative about the justice-seeking work at hand for us, especially white folks like me right now. This week, I offer words from the Bodhisattva Martin Luther King Jr., his mountaintop sermon, given about 30 hours before he was shot and killed. I offer these words as another attempt to help you change your narratives of impatience, grief, anger, and discomfort, and instead feel gratitude to be alive right now, today, during these incredibly powerful days. And my friends, I know many of you are exhausted and overwhelmed. That is understandable and okay. It's okay. The world is all messed up. But what would it mean if you had chosen to be alive this day instead of any other day in the course of history? What if you believe that this day is the best day to be alive? What if you believe that this age, this crazy, wild age of change and uncertainty, is the best age to be alive? This week ahead, wherein the first Black Indian woman will be sworn in as Vice President of America. What a week to be alive. What a miracle it is that we are here. What remarkable luck we have to be living in this time, conscious of these powerful days, able to act and learn in these powerful days. We've got some difficult days ahead, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. concludes in his final sermon. But that doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life, but I am not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. So it was spoken. So it shall be spoken. So it shall be done. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 169, the anthem of the civil rights movement and justice movements throughout our recent history. We shall overcome.
So I wanted to say a few words about this hymn as well. This is one of those hymns where, or one of those songs where you type it into Google, it comes up as "We Shall Overcome" by Pete Seeger. And I'm going to go into that history of how he got that, got to earn that as his song, despite this being a song with a much longer history than that. So if you actually have a hymnal on you and you go to the bottom of the page, unlike many of the African American spirituals that are in our hymnal, this one has quite a bit of history. It mentions it was initially an African American spiritual circa 1750 to 1875. So that part of its history, the song would have been sort of an amalgamation of various tunes and various words sung in the fields by slaves. One of the common sets of words that is likely sung was the words, "All be all right." And I have a particular interest in that word, all right. It's kind of a, instead of everything will be great or everything will be good, all be all right. The idea all will be right makes me sort of envision a type of peace or sort of a sense of generic well-being as opposed to things being good or getting better. I can imagine singing those words at the top of your lungs with this compelling and simple melody would be pretty cathartic. And I think that feeling of catharsis is something that will hang on throughout its history. Leading through the 1900s, the words that most commonly were sung to the tune would have been, "I will overcome." And then leading into the labor movements of the mid-40s, which is where the song really started to become incorporated with protest, the words were changed to "We will overcome," to make it more of a collective sense of movement. And then here's where Pete Seeger earns his songwriter title. He decided he would change the words to "We shall overcome." So maybe he earned his right to songwriter, maybe not. But I think as this song made its way through the civil rights movement, was sung by thousands, perhaps millions, it kept that sense of catharsis. So when I perform this song, maybe unlike some of the other African American spirituals, I actually encourage you with this one to dive into that catharsis a little bit. Sing along at home. feel the words deep in your heart. And I'll try to do the same.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Kai and Pete. And thank you for joining us today. My friends, we're headed into a big week. I know there are lots of feelings of excitement as well as anxiety going into the days ahead. And I want you to know that Wednesday morning, we will be having a Zoom prayer vigil for just a handful of minutes. If you would like to gather at 9 a.m. with me on Zoom and offer prayers for a day of peace and a future ahead in which all will be free. As we close our sermon today, won't you join me in prayer and meditation right now? May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May we all experience profound joy and the causes of profound joy. May we all be grateful for this day and the miracle that we are alive this day. May we all work so that all beings will be free. We close with our congregational words of benediction, which I think many of you know by heart. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affection. For those who come to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. My friends, our worship service has ended today. I wish you peace as you go in to the day ahead of you. Amen. And see you soon.